There's Marco D'Amico. I'm Shaun Starr. Welcome back to the Starr and D'Amico Show. Like and subscribe. The road to 20,000 subs begins with you. And a big shout out to our sponsors at cheapesttshirts.ca. If you're looking for quality tees, hoodies, heck, even aprons, and the best prices in this country, head over to cheapesttshirts.ca. Top brands like American Apparel, Columbia, Russell Athletic, and more. There's no minimum orders, and we've got sizes from small all the way to 5XL. That's what Marco likes to sleep in at night. And when you order today, they ship today, and most deliveries will arrive tomorrow. Cheapesttshirts.ca. Fast, easy, and affordable. And a big shout out to Catherine Prince. She's a certified real estate broker with Remax Platine. Always reachable when you need her, whether you're buying or selling, looking to move to the South Shore, looking to move to Montreal. 514-702-2474. Check out her website, Catherine with a K, catherineprince.ca. Marco D'Amico, the Montreal Canadiens begin their 4-game homestand. They've got their home opener tonight at the Bell Center as they welcome in the Seattle Kraken. And listen, this isn't an overreaction video. The Montreal Canadiens have 4 points through the opening 3 games of the season. But that doesn't mean that Ken Hughes isn't already planning for the future. Let's spend some minutes here talking about cap space. Let's talk about maneuverability. You and I had talked about, the trade window. When could it happen? Roster freezes before Christmas time. What do you think the timeline looks like? Not so much for the rest of the league. Let's focus on Montreal. What's that timeline look like to you today?
Well, I think the Canadians were going to want to improve this roster one way or the other. I mean, a lot of people are going to say, well, let's see what happens. Let's see where things go. Absolutely. I don't think there's anything imminent. But what I will say is when the team finally has cap space for the first time in half a decade.
Yeah.
Starting the season off, projected to start the season off at $4.5 million, $4.8 million with a 23-man roster, and then decide that they're going to waive Sammy Blais because they want to play with a 22-man roster, despite no like an unforced, just total organizational decision. To me, that indicated, hey, we don't need the player in the lineup. We have 13 forwards. Our farm team, I'm speaking as if I'm the Canadians here. Our farm team is down the orange line of the Metro. Like, we shouldn't necessarily have a problem here for call-ups or this or that. But what it did is it boosted the Canadians' cap space from 4.8 to 5.53. And what does that mean? The Canadians having $5.5 million right now in cap space, unlike when they were using LTIR, that number grows every day that money is not spent because salary is prorated, right? And it's prorated to the day. So, like, I'll give you an example. 5.5, halfway through the season, well, it counts for double, right? Around double. And so this is where the Canadians can be a little bit more aggressive earlier in the season, because for the first time in a long time, teams don't actually have to wait to the trade deadline anymore, because maximizing your cap space when there's a playoff salary cap is not the same thing. I'll give you, a direct example would be the Canadians themselves. Right now, they have $5.5 million. If they were to just accrue cap space until the trade deadline on March 6th, they would have $25.5 million. But it's useless to use all $25.5 million at the trade deadline when you have to have 20 players that make up $95.5 million, which is the current season salary cap, to be compliant in the playoffs, right? Like, so the Canadians would be way over. And so it kind of puts you in a situation where, okay, well, if the plan is not to maximize cap space at the deadline, and you still work with, say end of November, American Thanksgiving, roster freeze December 18th, the Canadians would have about $11 million, $12 million to spend. Then that wouldn't necessarily put them over the cap when it gets to the playoffs, because it's the 20 players, not the 23-man or 24-man roster at that point.
Right.
And that got me thinking, okay, the Canadians were aggressive last year. Remember, they were dead last, and they traded for Alex Carrier, and that changed the season.
Yeah.
Remember that? Like, the defense just absolutely just took off. In an interview that we did at RG with executive vice president Jeff Gorton, he said, we don't view the opening night roster as our final roster. We're going to look to improve this team during the season so that when we come time in the playoffs, like other teams, we're going to have, an improved roster. And the idea at the time was to wait out for teams. And we've talked about this on this channel already, so I won't bore everybody with the details, but there's an expectation that there is going to be quite a few teams that are going to throw in the towel early this year.
Exactly.
And some players, especially at center, may become available. And so the Canadiens have opened themselves to that possibility, be it everyone's Sidney Crosby acquisition that could potentially happen. They've, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there are other centers that will possibly become available around that time. If certain teams like, I don't know, Seattle, Boston, New York, Islanders, Rangers, like if those teams start to bottom out, Detroit even, that's when an opportunity is going to be available to strike, as those teams tried to pack it in and go for the Gavin McKenna, Keaton Verhoff draft. And the Canadiens are looking to continue pace and make the playoffs.
Catherine Prince, Remax Platine. It's time to talk about one of life's biggest decisions, and that's buying or selling your house. And I encourage you to visit catherineprince.ca for more information. That's Catherine with a K, prince.ca. A South Shore and Montreal area specialist. She's lived and worked in the region for over 20 years. catherineprince.ca. Her deep local roots give her unmatched insight, whether you're moving to Montreal, returning to Montreal, or relocating to the beautiful South Shore. Her approach is truly personal. She takes the time to understand your unique goals and priorities, then crafts a custom strategy around them. She moves with precision, leveraging deep market knowledge, sharp negotiation skills, and meticulous care to guide you through every step. If you're considering a move to Montreal, a return to the city, or settling on the South Shore, Catherine is ready to be your strategic partner. Call Catherine Prince, that's Catherine with a K, 514-702-2474 to start the conversation. Well, that's the thing. Here on this game day, right? And before the game, head over to McLean's, 1210 Peel Street, the home of the Canadiens, home or away, the home of D'Amico and Starr, live from October 22nd. I think I could speak for D'Amico. You might want to try the butter chicken pizza. Even if you're a pizza traditionalist, I'm telling you, I wouldn't lie to you about food. D'Amico's leaving. He's got trauma because he hasn't had butter chicken pizza. The service, the ambiance, they know how to take care of you. And if you're there, why don't you give a shout out to Starr and D'Amico? Tell them that we sent you there. The thing is, 3 games in, there hasn't been like an obvious weakness. You can be frustrated with the power play. It's 12th in the National Hockey League at 20%, right? They've got 4 points after 6 games. The Boston Bruins going into Tuesday, right? I mean, look very, very strong out of the gate. But I still think the weakness is the weakness, right? They're looking for depth down the middle. And, Kirby Dach is easing his way into the lineup, playing over 13 minutes. He's got 1 assist. I thought on Saturday he looked better. I thought his movements were good. I thought he had pace. I saw him throw his body around a little bit. So I like Kirby Dach through 3 games. And, I'm not allergic to watching Big 77 when he's out there, right? Mm-hmm. But what's the price to pay? You brought up the Justin Barron, Alex Carrier transaction. I agree with everything you had mentioned there. It stabilized, brought structure, brought depth, all of those things. Check, 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 check. Like, how rich do the Montreal Canadiens? They're rich with prospects, but do they want to spend? Do they want to go into Royal Mount and go into the Hublot store and drop $30K on a beautiful timepiece? Or are they going to, look for the Timex because it keeps on ticking, What do you think Ken Hughes and Jeff Gordon's appetite is to spend if they believe they can bring this team to another level this season?
A lot of people thought it was a steal at the time of the trade, but I thought the Canadiens paid us a nice package for Noah Dobson when he became available, right? 2 first-round picks and a guy in Emil Heineman, who many see as a future middle 6 player in the NHL with physicality and goal-scoring ability, right? So if they saw that for a top pair right D, what do you think they're going to pay for a top 6 center if that center is a prime center like Dobson is a prime defenseman in his position, right?
Well, that's the money question, though, right?
But there's many things that you can do. Like, one thing the Montreal Canadiens haven't been shy about doing is trading first-round picks, right?
Yeah.
They traded one first-round pick in 2022, one first-round pick in 2023, one first-round pick in 2024, two first-round picks in 2025. They basically traded 5 first-round picks in the last 4 years. You know, they're not shy about it, right? Because they're drafting well elsewhere, and they had other picks as well. And some of those picks were used to move up and so on and so forth. So
yeah,
I don't think that they'd be necessarily, hesitant to trade their first round pick. Of course, there would have to be protection in that situation, right? Like if the Canadiens, finish bottom 10, I don't know. But I don't necessarily doubt that the first round pick would be on the table. They have 2 second-round picks, and you just talked about it. They have prospects that could very much be available for trade that other teams like, or players. And I think that's the other thing, right? Like, Canadians have to make some decisions about some of their rosters, right? Because on defense, Adam Engstrom isn't just knocking on the door; he's yelling into the intercom. Like, he's right there. Even playing for Laval over the weekend, like, I thought Adam Engstrom was the best defenseman on the ice, and just that mobility is there.
Right there.
He's close to ready, so that whether he's included in a trade or he bumps somebody out of the lineup that gets included in the trade, something's going to have to give sooner or later, right? And so I think there's that element comes into it as well. So, and again, I'm not going to say that he's going to be shopped or whatnot. All I got to say is that I know for a fact that scouts really liked his game. Going back to the preseason and walking by a few, and talking about Engstrom's ability. So, ultimately they have the pieces. Some people may say, maybe including David Reinbacher could make sense. I would be iffy. Yeah. I would be iffy about doing that because I feel like his value is not at its most highest, and selling low on him right now might not be ideal. Get him a few games up and see where he's at with his development and make a decision. But the Canadiens, I think the one player I really wouldn't like to see the Canadiens trade, ironically, for a top 6 center is Michael Hage.
Oh, yeah. I got to think he's untouchable. I have to think he's untouchable. Like, I think David Reinbacher is more, air quote, touchable today. I
don't know that I would call him untouchable, but it would take.
I wouldn't do it for Sidney Crosby. I wouldn't trade Michael Hage for Sidney Crosby for 3 seasons.
No. But, like, for example, okay, Seattle decides to blow it up, and they get fed up with the team that they have. Matty Beniers becomes available.
Yeah.
That's a conversation. A lot of people are going to be like, no, Michael Hage is going to be better. You can make that argument. But the way that Matty Beniers has been playing to start the season for Seattle, he looks like he's on a revenge tour. And that, if he can be a left shot, strong at face-off, 60 to 70 point center, then we're having a conversation. Now, of course, I'm not saying trade Michael Hage. Not saying that at all. But these are the kinds of conversations you would have to have if a player like that suddenly became available. With that said, the Canadiens in this situation right now with their salary cap space are just opening themselves up to the possibility in case any of these names that they've earmarked over the summer become available. Because the word around the league, again, is that some names that were circling around in the summer and some names that we haven't even heard about yet are going to start becoming available as we get into the roster freeze. And I'll give you a direct example of how this has happened before. A year ago today, I would never have guessed that Dylan Cousins will be playing hockey for the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah.
Right? And it was about in American Thanksgiving that you started hearing whispers of his availability in Buffalo. And it ain't any better in Buffalo right now.
Yeah. At least they scored a goal.
One goal in 2 games.
Yeah.
But when you look at the way that deal came about, before Ottawa pulled the trigger on that deal, the Nashville Predators, prior to the trade freeze in December, were heavy on Dylan Cousins, right? Because they thought he was available. They were going to be able to do something, but they just didn't have the salary cap space to make it work. They wanted Buffalo to retain. Deal kind of fell through. Well, Canadians aren't going to be in that kind of a situation this time around, because by the time you get to late November, early or mid-December, they're going to have closer to $10 million in cap space, probably 10, 11 million. That will leave you open to have the cap space, the assets, and the timing to make that kind of a trade if a player like Cousins, whom the Canadiens were interested in, would be available. And I think that's where we're seeing the Canadiens now. And from the people that I've spoken to, everyone expects the Canadiens to be as aggressive in that front when a player becomes available that they like, similarly to how they pounced on Noah Dobson the moment they heard that the New York Islanders were making him available. Because understand that Kent Hughes wasn't the first one to that dance. But when he found out that Noah Dobson was available, he jumped to the front of the line.
Correct. So, and it helped that Noah Dobson wanted to be here too, right?
Yeah, well, there were... It broke down differently. So Noah Dobson wanted to stay in the East. St. Louis was very much looking at trying to acquire Noah Dobson. The moment they found out he wanted to stay in the East, a lot of teams backed off. Then it became Montreal Columbus. The preference was Montreal. And, you know, Montreal included 2 first-round picks and Emil Heinemann that they actually really liked. And Noah Dobson was amenable to an agreement for a contract with Montreal. The Canadiens are very opportunistic, but have rarely had the cap situation mirroring their vision for aggressive acquisition.
Yeah.
Right. They were able to do it last year with Alex Carrier because it worked out with the numbers, and you have Carey Price on LTIR. But it would have been a little bit more difficult this year if they hadn't traded Carey Price.
Fair.
And they had started with 23 men instead of 22. So because of that, they're now open to that kind of a trade. And I'd say in response to last year, most of their assets available to trade outside of their first round, their draft picks, are all a year older, a year mature, a year closer to the NHL, which makes them more attractive. You look at a guy like Logan Mailloux. You don't get Logan Mailloux for Zachary Bolduc unless St. Louis believes that he is on the cusp of making it, as opposed to being, you know, more of a raw prospect, like a kid playing in junior, like Bryce Pickford right now. You know, so I think that's the difference.
There's Marco D'Amico. I'm Shaun Starr. Make sure you're at McLean's on October 22nd for the live show. We have lots of prizes to give away, including our friends at Morella's at morellasteakhouse.ca. They're open 7 days a week. Highway 132 in Ganawage, and no tax on that bill. Prime steaks, beautiful seafood, the fresh pasta made in-house, premium cigars. Morella's Steakhouses. Notice what D'Amico and Starr are doing. There he goes. Anytime I talk about premium food, D'Amico and Starr are going to be there, and we want to send you to Morella's. And the only way you can get there, I mean, you can make a reservation at morellasteakhouse.ca, or you can come win a free gift card, $100 maybe, to spend at Morella's, only from your friends at the Starr and D'Amico Show. Get ready for the Montreal Canadiens' future. We're going to be talking about Michael Hage this week, and make sure you join us tomorrow morning at 10:30 as we recap the Montreal Canadiens and Seattle Kraken. It's the Habs home opener.